All right, shalom, brothers and sisters. Uh, Glad to have you join us today. We got another video we're going to drop on you, something to consider and think about. So today we are going to be looking at how do we walk like our Messiah, Yeshua HaMashiach. Especially, when I was in the mainstream churches, we would hear this over and over again. And sadly, when we really look at what it means, it gets glossed over, or it's just some generalized sense of, well, we just got to be nice people and love people. But I'm here to say that the scripture has a little bit more to say on the subject, and we're going to dive into it. This is definitely going to be a two-parter. We're going to tackle it from two angles today, or not today, but one angle today, one different angle in part two. And so let's jump into it. All right, let's go with this one. All right, so how do we walk like Yeshua? Right, so one of the common things we hear from the pulpit today is that we should walk like Jesus walks. Usually, it comes very surface level in the form of love everybody. What we don't usually see is an in depth look at what it actually means to walk as our Messiah walks. All right, so we're going to look at 1 John chapter 2, verse 6. Whoever says he abides in him ought to walk in the same way in which he walked. All right, so we're going to look at two ideas here. Part one, we're going to cover the context and what John is laying down here. And then part two, we're going to look into the actual walk of Yeshua and look at some of the things he did and taught. But today, we're grabbing the context the Apostle John is laying down here. All right, so in this verse, 1 John 2:6, we're going to look at the walk in the same way part. You got that highlighted there. That's the part we're going to be focused on. So where did John get this phrase from? Is he connecting this to anything? Was this just some random words he picked to say? Just that he just used that to say be like Yeshua? I mean, he could have said a million things here, right? He could have said love like Jesus, be like Jesus, do the same things Jesus did. But he specifically chose walk in the same way in which he walked. And we're going to let's see what the word says about this little phrase right here, walk in the same way. All right, so the New Testament is just commentary on the Old Testament. When John says walk like Yeshua, he's drawing from the only scriptures that he has, the Old Testament. He uses that phrase specifically and intentionally to make the point that he wants to make. We don't pick up on it because we don't know the front of the book. Let's look at it. Right, so Exodus chapter 16, verse 4 says, Then the Lord said to Moshe, Behold, I am about to rain bread from heaven for you, and the people shall go out and gather a day's portion every day, that I may test them, whether they will walk in my law or not. Exodus chapter 18, verse 20. And you shall warn them about the statutes and the laws, and make them know the way in which they must walk and what they must do. The statutes and the laws are the way they must walk, right? All right, Leviticus 18:4. You shall follow my rules and keep my statutes and walk in them. I am Yahweh your Elohim. Leviticus chapter 26, verse 3 through 4. If you walk in my statutes and observe my commandments and do them, then I will give you your rains in their season, and the land shall yield its increase, and the trees of the field shall yield their fruit. if you walk in my statutes and observe my commandments. Deuteronomy chapter 5, verse 33, you shall walk in all the way that Yahweh your Elohim has commanded you, that you may live, and that it may go well with you, and that you may live long in the land that you shall possess. Deuteronomy chapter 8, verse 6. So you shall keep the commandments of Yahweh your Elohim by walking in his ways and by fearing him. Now, I know it's going to feel like we're beating a dead horse here with this verse overload, but we got to go through it. We got to hammer because this is what it's telling us, right? Don't be mad at me. I didn't write the Bible. I'm just reading it. All right, Deuteronomy 11:22 through 23. For if you will be careful to do all this commandment that I command you to do, loving Yahweh your Elohim, walking in all his ways, and holding fast to him, then the Lord will drive out all these nations before you, and you will dispossess nations greater and mightier than you. Deuteronomy 13, verse 4. You shall walk after Yahweh your Elohim, and fear him, and keep his commandments, and obey his voice, and you shall serve him and hold fast to him. Deuteronomy chapter 26, verse 17 says, you have declared today that Yahweh is your Elohim, and that you will walk in his ways, and keep his statutes, and his commandments, and his rules, and will obey his voice. Deuteronomy chapter 28, verse 9. Yahweh will establish you as a people holy to himself, as he has sworn to you, if you keep the commandments of Yahweh your Elohim and walk in his ways. Joshua chapter 22, verse 5 tells us, only be very careful to observe the commandment and the law that Moses, the servant of Yahweh, commanded you, to love Yahweh your Elohim, and to walk in all his ways, and to keep his commandments, and to cling to him, and to serve him with all your heart and with all your soul. 1 Kings chapter 8, verse 57 through 58. Yahweh our Elohim be with us, as he was with our fathers. May he not leave us or forsake us, that he may incline our hearts to him, to walk in all his ways, and to keep his commandments, his statutes, and his rules, which he commanded our fathers. Isaiah chapter 42, verse 24. Who gave up Jacob to the looter, and Israel to the plunderers? Was it not Yahweh, against whom we have sinned, in whose ways they would not walk, and whose law they would not obey? Jeremiah 7:23. But this command I gave them, obey my voice, and I will be your Elohim, and you shall be my people, and walk in the way that I command you, that it may be well with you. Jeremiah 26, verse 4. You shall say to them, thus says Yahweh, if you will not listen to me, to walk in my law that I have set before you. We're going to go ahead and just assume there's bad things happening after that, right? Oh, Jeremiah 44:23. It is because you made offerings, and because you sinned against Yahweh, and did not obey the voice of Yahweh, or walk in his law, and in his statutes, and in his testimonies, that this disaster has happened to you as at this day. Right, Ezekiel 11:19 through 20. And I will give them one heart and a new spirit, and I will put within them. I will remove the heart of stone from their flesh, and give them a heart of flesh, that they may walk in my statutes, and keep my rules, and obey them. And they shall be my people, and I will be their Elohim. Ezekiel 18:5 through 9. If a man is righteous Deuteronomy 6:25, and does what is just and right, if he does not eat upon the mountains, or lift up his eyes to the idols of the house of Israel, does not defile his neighbor's wife, or approach a woman in her time of menstrual impurity, does not oppress anyone, but restores the debtor his pledge, commits no robbery, gives his bread to the hungry, and covers the naked with a garment. That's all Torah there. Does not lend at interest or take any profit, withholds his hand from injustice, executes true justice between man and man, all Torah, walks in my statutes and keeps my rules by acting faithfully, he is righteous. He shall surely live, declares Yahweh, your Elohim. Oh, sorry, I got 12-hour graveyards. I got to sip on this coffee in preparation. All right, so Ezekiel chapter 20, verse 13. But the house of Israel rebelled against me in the wilderness. They did not walk in my statutes, but rejected my rules, by which, if a person does them, he shall live, and my Sabbaths they greatly profaned. Then I said I would pour out my wrath upon them in the wilderness to make a full end of them. Ezekiel 20:19 through 21. I am Yahweh your Elohim. Walk in my statutes and be careful to obey my rules and keep my Sabbaths holy, that they may be a sign between me and you, that you may know that I am Yahweh your Elohim. But the children rebelled against me. They did not walk in my statutes and were not careful to obey my rules, by which, if a person does them, he shall live. They profaned my Sabbaths. Ezekiel 36:27. And I will put my spirit within you and cause you to walk in my statutes and be careful to obey my rules. That's new covenant talk there, right? Micah 4:2. And many nations shall come and say, Come, let us go up to the mountain of Yahweh, to the house of the Elohim of Jacob, that he may teach us his ways, and that we may walk in his paths. For out of Zion, that's New Jerusalem, heaven coming down, right? For out of Zion shall go forth the law and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. Right, Psalm 119, verse 1. Blessed are those whose way is blameless, who walk in the law of the Lord. Nehemiah chapter 10, verse 29. Join with their brothers, their nobles, and enter into a curse and an oath to walk in God's law. That was given by Moses, the servant of God, and to observe and do all the commandments of Yahweh our Elohim and his rules and his statutes. Luke chapter 1, verse 6. And they were both righteous before Yahweh, walking blamelessly in all the commandments and statutes of Yahweh. 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verse 1 through 3. Finally, then, brothers, we ask and urge you in Yeshua that you receive from us how you ought to walk and to please God, just as you are doing, that you do so more and more. For you know what instructions we gave you through Yeshua. For this is the will of Yahweh, your sanctification, that you abstain from sexual immorality. So John is clearly linking walking like Yeshua with keeping the commandments, just like the scriptures, plain as day, over and over again. Walking with Yahweh is obeying his statutes and commandments. And that's what that's what John is making the connection with. That's why John chose walking like Yeshua walked, because we know Yeshua was blameless. We know Yeshua didn't follow his own will, he followed his Father's will, right? So let's get back on the slide here. Now I want to back up a verse and show you another concept that John wants to link here with it as well. Love. So 1 John 2, 5 through 6 says, "But whoever keeps his word, in him truly the love of God is perfected. By this we may know that we are in him. Whoever says he abides in him ought to walk in the same way in which he walked." All right. So John is also linking love with walking in the commandments. Let's look at it. All right, Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 5 through 6. "You shall love Yahweh your Elohim with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your might. And these words that I command you today shall be on your heart." Deuteronomy 7, verse 9. "Know therefore that Yahweh your Elohim is Elohim, the faithful Elohim, who keeps covenant and steadfast love with those who love him and keep his commandments to 1,000 generations." Deuteronomy chapter 10, verse 12 through 13. "And now, Israel, what does Yahweh your Elohim require of you, but to fear Yahweh your Elohim, to walk in all his ways, to love him, to serve Yahweh your Elohim with all your heart and with all your soul, and to keep the commandments and the statutes of Yahweh, which I am commanding you today for your good." Deuteronomy chapter 11, verse 1. "You shall therefore love Yahweh your Elohim, and keep his charge, his statutes, his rules, and his commandments always." All right, so Deuteronomy chapter 13, verse 3 through 4 says, "You shall not listen to the words that a prophet or a dreamer of dreams, or that dreamer of dreams, for Yahweh your Elohim is testing you to know whether you love Yahweh your Elohim with all your heart and with all your soul. You shall walk after Yahweh your Elohim and fear him and keep his commandments and obey his voice, and you shall serve him and hold fast to him." Deuteronomy 30:16. "If you obey the commandments of Yahweh your Elohim that I command you today, by loving Yahweh your Elohim to by walking in his ways, and by keeping his commandments and his statutes and his rules, then you shall live and multiply, and Yahweh your Elohim will bless you in the land that you are entering to take possession of it." Joshua 22, verse 5. "Only be careful to observe the commandment and the law that Moshe, the servant of Yahweh, commanded you, to love Yahweh your Elohim, and to walk in all his ways, and to keep his commandments, and to cling to him, and to serve him with all your heart and with all your soul." Nehemiah chapter 1, verse 5. "And I said, O Yahweh, Elohim of heaven, the great and awesome Elohim, who keeps covenant and steadfast love with those who love him and keep his commandments." John 14:23 through 24 says, "Jesus answered him, If anyone loves me, he will keep my word, and my Father will love him, and we will come to him and make our home with him. Whoever does not love me does not keep my words, and the word that you hear is not mine, but the Father's who sent me." 1 John 5:2 through 3. "By this we know that we love the children of Elohim, when we love Elohim and obey his commandments. For this is the love of Elohim, that we keep his commandments, and his commandments are not burdensome." Thought they were bondage. All right. 2 John 5 through 6. And whoa, 2 John 5 verse 6 maybe. "And now I ask you, dear lady, not as though I were writing you a new commandment, but the one we have had from the beginning, that we love one another. And this is love, that we walk according to his commandments. This is the commandment, just as you have heard from the beginning. so that you should walk in it. All right, so keeping Yah's commandments, loving God, and walking in them is a consistent theme for believers from the front of the Bible to the back. Some of you will still look for a way out, and you'll say that John is repurposing the idea from the Old Testament and using it for some new law that we get from Messiah. But there is no difference. Messiah's law is the same as Yah's. He didn't make any new ones. You don't have to believe me. John clears this issue up for us himself. We'll also see this in agreement with Yeshua's walk and Yeshua's teachings. 1 John 2, 7 through 8. Beloved, I am writing you no new commandment, but an old commandment that you had from the beginning. The old commandment is the word that you have heard. At the same time, it is a new commandment that I am writing to you, which is true in him and in you, because the darkness is passing away and the true light is already shining. All right, so the reason John said it's old but new at the same time is because he was bringing up prophecies of Yeshua. That's the new part. We're not waiting for the light of the world to come, he's here already. Isaiah chapter 51, verse 4 through 5. Give attention to me, my people, and give ear to me, my nation, for a law will go out from me, and I will set my justice for a light to the peoples. My righteousness draws near, my salvation has gone out, and my arms will judge the peoples. The coastlands hope for me, and for my arm they wait. Isaiah chapter 2, 3 through 5. And many people shall come and say, Come, let us go up to the mountain of Yahweh, to the house of the Elohim of Jacob, that he may teach us his ways, and that we may walk in his paths. For out of Zion shall go forth the law and the word of Yahweh from Jerusalem. He shall judge between the nations, and shall decide disputes for many peoples. And they shall beat their swords in the plowshares, and their spears in the pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war any more. O house of Jacob, come, let us walk in the light of the Lord. Right, so John chapter 3, verse 19 through 21. And this is the judgment. The light has come into the world, and people love the darkness rather than the light, because their works were evil. For everyone who does wicked things hates the light, and does not come to the light, lest his work should be exposed. But whoever does what is true comes to the light, so that it may be clearly seen that his works have been carried out in Yahweh. So the command isn't new. The light of the world is here now, and it is all tied together in Scripture for us to see. Love, commandments, and walking in them. John tells us that he's talking about love. We already see the connection between love and the law. Love God, love others doesn't replace the old commands. They sum up those commands. If you properly follow the instructions from Yahweh for life, you will be showing love to God and to others. Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 5. You shall love Yahweh your Elohim with all your heart, all your soul, and all your might. Leviticus 19, 17 through 18. You shall not hate your brother in your heart, but you shall reason frankly with your neighbor, lest you incur sin because of him. You shall not take vengeance or bear a grudge against the sons of your own people, but you shall love your neighbor as yourself. I am Yahweh. Matthew 23, 36 through 40. Teacher, which is the great commandment in the law? And he said to him, You shall love Yahweh your Elohim with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the great and first commandment. And a second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments depend all the law and the prophets. Romans 13, 8 through 10. Owe no one anything except to love each other. For the one who loves another has fulfilled the law. Right? It just means done it. Doesn't mean it's finished. For the commandments, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not murder, you shall not steal, you shall not covet, and any other commandment are summed up in this word, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. It's not done away with and replaced with, it's summed up, right? Summed up. Love does no wrong to a neighbor, therefore love is fulfilling of the law, right? So that's if you borrow the lawnmower from your neighbor and you break it, you replace it, right? That's a command, right? The commands are about how to treat others and about how to worship and love Yahweh. They're not hard, they're not outrageous, they're not nothing crazy. It's just what we're supposed to do. And when we do them, then we will be loving our neighbor, we will be loving Yahweh, and we won't have any problems, right? And they're all summed up into two categories: love God, love others. So John even shows us that the way that we show love is by all right, we're back. First John is the message that you have heard from the beginning, that we should love one another. We should not be like Cain, who was of the evil one and murdered his brother. And why did he murder him? Because his own deeds were evil and his brother's righteous. Do not be surprised, brothers, that the world hates you. We know that we have passed out of death into life because we love the brothers. Whoever does not love abides in death. Everyone who hates his brother is a murderer, and you know that no murderer has eternal life abiding in him. By this we know love, that he laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for the brothers. But if anyone has the world's goods and sees his brother in need, yet closes his heart against him, how does God's love abide in him? Little children, let us not love in word or talk, but in deed and truth. Right. So if you've made it this far and you still aren't picking up what me and John are putting down here, I've got one more for you to think about. Right. So if John is really just talking about something new and not the old commandments from Yeshua, then where does this verse come from? 1 John 5:21. Little children, keep yourselves from idols. Right? He did not get that from Yeshua. Yeshua didn't talk about idols at all. There's only one place where John is grabbing this from, and it makes it crystal clear that he's not talking about some new commands from Yeshua. John means the commands of Yahweh. Leviticus 19:4, do not turn to idols or make for yourself any gods of cast metal. I am Yahweh. All right, and so that's it for today. I think we made a strong case that John was pulling from the Old Testament, and he used that phrase intentionally because he obeyed the commandments. Yeshua obeyed the commandments. All the disciples, apostles, followers, they obeyed the commandments, and their writings and the things that they're putting down for us, their commentations of the old scriptures, without a doubt, are lining up that love and obeying the Father are what's intended. And that's how we love Him, is we obey the commandments. That's how we love others. We obey the commandments. And so until next time, hope to see you soon. Look for part 2. We're gonna jump into Matthew probably, and we're gonna walk out Yeshua's walk, and we're gonna make all the connections, and we're gonna do all the things, and it's gonna be fun. So I hope you can join me on it. But until next time, shalom.